Hello, Gen Genies. It's me, Julie.
And Rich.
Before we get started today, we want to let you in on some exciting news. We have launched our new Patreon page for the podcast.
Woohoo! We are super excited about this new chapter for CutOff Jeans.
So, Patreon is a website where listeners like you can pledge a small monthly amount. We're talking only $5 or $10, guys, to support the podcast and help defray the cost of bringing you the show each week.
To be clear, CutOff Jeans will continue to be absolutely free. But to thank you for your support, we are going to offer our patrons some fun little extras.
Like early access to the podcast every week, where you'll get to hear the latest episode before it's released to the general public.
And why not make your friends jealous with exclusive patron-only CutOff Jeans swag?
Fancy. And here's something you guys have been asking for, and I'm really looking forward to this. I'm going to host a monthly, hour-long, online Ask Me Anything session where patrons at the $10 level can literally ask me anything.
Anything? You're a brave woman, Julie.
You know, I know. I'm also going to give access to my blog, Are You My Father?, where I tell the story of my search, actually it's my life story basically, for my biological father in even more detail than I did on the podcast.
Wow, your blog was the original inspiration for CutOff Jeans, wasn't it?
It was.
Wow. Well, all patrons at any level will receive a shout out on the podcast along with our undying gratitude for your support.
Yep. You guys know that this show is a labor of love for me. It's something I'm very passionate about. It'd mean so much to me if you would consider supporting our work here on the podcast by going to patreon.com/CutOff Jeans podcast.
That's Patreon, patreon.com/CutOff Jeans podcast.
We'll add a link to it on the podcast and on the Facebook page. Thank you all, my Gen Genies.
And now, on with the show.
Woo!
Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip, hip, hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Jeans.
Welcome to CutOff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the producer and co-host of the podcast. Hi, Julie. Welcome to season 4.
And same to you, my friend. I really don't feel like we had any time off. Do you?
No. Well, you know what it was? It was that we've been doing it every other week for so long. We really just added like another week to it.
Right. So. It was just like a sick day.
Yeah.
More than anything.
But I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to have our listeners on board for our new season, and I'm excited to get started.
Yes.
What have you been up to in our short break?
Oh, Lord, so much. So much has happened. First of all, I have to apologize to members of the Patreon Facebook page because I was going to try a Facebook Live. And where I just went on and people asked me questions, whoever was there. And so I said, stand by. I'm thinking of trying this Facebook Live thing in a couple of hours. During that time, things happened. So, we've had raccoon issues at our house before, and we've got, we have
Yes.
video of them coming in and out. Well, we had a new round of raccoon issues, and it was louder than ever. They made a different way in, and the only one it really affects is me because it's directly under the room where I work. So they go up through the walls, and it sounds like they're building condos.
Oh my gosh.
It's so loud. So I finally had my husband reset that camera up, and sure enough, big old raccoon leaving in the middle of the night, coming back a couple hours later. So the hole on the other side, I opened up a little bit, and I let Brooklyn, my big lab, because she's been sniffing around like crazy. That's another thing that's so distracting. She comes in here and sniffs the floor and just goes nuts the whole time.
She can smell the raccoon,
and
sure.
So I let her explore a little bit under the house. She wasn't that into it. Like, she could smell it, but didn't want to go that far back. She was being cautious, which is really smart, I think.
Yeah, those raccoons can be nasty.
We were trying to figure out how to get them. Oh, and we did the thing where, because we have a hatch inside the house in the coat closet. So I was throwing dog hair down there, and we tried shining light down there and putting ammonia down there. Just things that the internet says that raccoons hate. Well, none of it seemed to be working. So that day when I was supposed to do the Facebook Live, I came back into the living room just minding my own business, and all of a sudden I heard Brooklyn barking ravenously, and I heard other noises, and it sounded like she was really far away. Suddenly I realized she was directly beneath me. She was under the house, and she was in a fight with a raccoon. And I was like, where are you? Oh no. So I started like screaming through the floor for her to come out. And then I went to the opening outside and screamed in there. I couldn't see her, and she wasn't barking a lot. And like, I heard her kind of like, whimper a little bit. So then I was worried that she was hurt. And so I had to go get my son to get him to help me get her out. And I pulled the hole. I pulled everything out of the coat closet and lifted up the hole and tried to see her. I couldn't see her down there. I climbed down there. Anyway, it's a long story. It took 45 minutes. I finally saw her, and she saw me. I had to move ducting and stuff so that she could see a way through. She must have chased one in there and not even realized how she got all the way back there. But she like army crawled on her belly to get to me and to get around things. And we finally got her to the hole, but we couldn't get her to come up through the hole. I had to get salami, and she would, it took forever. We ended up just pulling her out, brute strength, to get her out of there.
Wow.
Yeah. And then Beckett had a panic attack after it was like, because he was like, okay, that was a lot. The next morning, my husband comes in and he goes, well, confirmation. We had footage of this huge raccoon going in and bringing out 3 babies at 3 separate times.
Wow.
And relocating them. So she was like, we are moving. Because that was probably terrifying for her. It doesn't look, I don't think Brooklyn hurt anybody, and I don't think she was hurt. No, she didn't appear to be hurt. She might have got a little scratch on her face.
Oh, good. I was going to say, as long as they're in the room where you're doing the podcast, Julie, you should just get one of them on as the guest. Today's our story time will be the raccoon.
Will be the raccoon under my house. I was very, very sad seeing her carry those babies out, and like she would get out the hole and then she would like cradle them, and it was the saddest thing ever.
She's going to be on some other podcast about how, she was this unwed mother that was forced from her home. She lost one of her babies, and now she's trying to DNA test to see where she could find them.
Raccoon DNA tests. Good times. Good times, everybody. Yeah. So, gosh, that was a long-winded way of apologizing.
So maybe we should do a schedule ahead of time of this talk back rather than
yes, because we never know when raccoons are going to show up in my house, apparently. And real quick, my daughter is moving out of our house today, and my son graduated high school on Saturday. Boom.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I really don't have anything to report other than I'm back at work and I'm enjoying it.
Oh, right. Are you enjoying it? How much are you working?
It's just actually like 1 or 2 nights right now a week, but it's going well, and I'm happy to be playing the piano again. I realize I can still do it. That's nice.
Good. That is good.
It reminds me of a former life.
Right.
It was like before the break.
Yeah.
And it's good. I'm enjoying being around people again and seeing people I haven't seen. Everybody, just so nice. They tell me how it feels normal again to be in a restaurant and hear live music and all of that. So that's all I've got. So let's move on to DNA news.
All right, let's do that. Good news. Congratulations to the Access Connecticut Adoptee Rights Group and all Connecticut-born adoptees and allies. The bill HB 6105 just passed the Connecticut General Assembly, which is for adopted people born in Connecticut to obtain their original birth certificate.
That should be a federal law at this point, rather
it's not
than
even
state
close.
By state.
It is not even close. Even in California, where you'd think that it would be more open.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's something like 7 or 8, and some are half in that the biological people can go back and redact their names if they want, if they know about it. So that's not considered completely open at all. But most places
good for Connecticut.
Order. Yay, Connecticut. There's a bill that they're trying to get through in Arizona, but right now it's only allowing people born before 1966. So that's not complete equality either.
I wonder why 1966? Like, what is that?
Oh, because they're thinking the biological people are more likely to be dead at that point. Probably, it's kind of like the census.
I see. So the good news is you can find out who your birth parents were. The bad news is they're probably dead.
Yes.
Congratulations.
That's happened a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, here's a story you sent me.
Oh, I sent you several stories. There's a lot of DNA news.
And it's a good one. So there was a sheriff on a United flight flying to California from Colorado in 1982. And they were flying over the Guanella Pass. And he noticed an SOS signal. I guess somebody was doing it with their headlights. He, I guess, contacted the flight crew and said, I need you to contact the police. There's somebody right there at the Guanella Pass that needs help.
That was in Colorado, correct?
That was in Colorado.
Yes.
Yes. In January of 1982. So they radio down, and this guy, Dave Montoya, he was a fire chief, I guess, but he got a call from a dispatch operator telling him, hey, go rescue this guy. There's somebody needs help. And sure enough, he did. He went up and he found this guy, was a truck driver, and he was signaling with his headlights. And
he was stuck in the snow or something.
He was stuck in the snow. Yeah.
Like in a pass that was impassable in the winter.
So he said, sure as heck, there he was in his little pickup. He saw me and said, oh, God, I'm saved. He said he got drunk and decided to drive home. That's not smart either. And I said, you came over the pass? And he said, well, it seemed like a good idea. I thought, how in the heck did this guy get so lucky for all that stuff to fall in place? That it is amazing that somebody in a plane saw his SOS signal.
I know.
Nuts.
And
Nuts.
Gilligan's Island was there for years and no one saw them from a plane.
Right. And they did amazing things to get off that thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Montoya said that the guy, his last name was Phillips. He had a bruise on the side of his face, and that he said he'd gotten out of his truck to go to the bathroom and had slipped and slammed headfirst in the corner of his truck. And Montoya had actually seen him before. They both worked in a local mine. It was weird. He said, we ended up picking the guy straight out of hell, Montoya said. Okay, fast forward. So it turns out that on that same night, a few hours earlier, 22-year-old Annette Schnee and 29-year-old Barbara Oberholzer went missing from Breckenridge. They'd been hiking, I guess, home from work. Hitchhiking. Oh, yes, thank you. Hitchhiking. Oberholzer's body was found on January 7th, and Schnee's body was found 6 months later. They'd both been shot, their bodies and personal belongings dumped at remote locations several miles from town and not far from the Guanella Pass. So this gentleman who was a retired detective, his name was Charlie McCormick, I guess he moved to the area where the girls are from, and he was retired, but because he'd hated working murder cases or something. But somehow or other, he was hired by one of the missing women's families as a private investigator to see if he could figure out what happened to them. Okay. Yeah. And he charged them $1 a year. Oh. So he was clearly doing it altruistically.
Yes.
So he ended up, with everything that's been going on with genetic genealogy, he ended up cracking the case with genetic genealogy. And I guess he had other people wherever he was working that had a genetic genealogy team, but they had managed to get some of the DNA from the victims, and ultimately it led back to that same man who was rescued by the SOS with his SOS signal that same night.
It's incredible. And was this guy not a suspect at the time?
I don't think so. Yeah. He even lived. He kept living in the same area.
Yeah, he didn't act suspicious or leave or skip town. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was able to avoid it for all these years. He's 70 now.
I wonder what the motive was. I mean, he shot 2 women and left them for dead.
I'm sure he probably did more than shoot them. That's probably how they got the DNA.
Oh, yeah.
Would be my guess.
Yeah. But on the same night, huh?
I mean, the events that led up to that, and it never, ever would have been solved without genetic genealogy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And this guy at this point probably thought, well, I've, made it this far in life and no one's discovered that I killed these women back in the 80s.
Yeah. I always think about all of the people that have gotten away with things years ago if they're shaking in their boots now.
Yeah.
Because...
Well, because I would imagine that at first, after you do something horrible like that, you're afraid you're going to be found out, you're going to be caught. And then after time and over time, you probably, as you go on with your life and you
false
think,
sense of security. I got away with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then all these years later to have that come back at you.
Science.
I know. Good for science and
Yay,
good
science.
for the families of those poor women. Because wasn't one of them a mother? I believe she was.
I think so. Yeah, one was 29. I think there were 22 and 29. But
and one of them was a mother, and I remember this article, and they interviewed
their family,
her son. I think her son, who's obviously an adult. He was a child at the time, and he grew up without his mom. It's horrible. And never knew what happened to her or why she left and then got shot. Like it didn't make any sense to him, and to have that kind of closure. I'm sure it's not, I don't know how much comfort it gives him, but it must feel like at least now we know what happened.
Always. Just having the truth is important for everybody, as I say constantly. Right. I just went back and I just realized the gentleman who headed the solving of the case wasn't hired by the family until 1989. So he spent since 1989 working on this.
Wow.
So, wow. That's amazing.
Well, and then also, I don't know if we were going to talk about it later or not, but just recently there are 2 states that have passed laws to restrict the police use of DNA in searching out these kind of crimes. And, I don't know how I feel about it now because you look at this and you go, well, good. I'm so glad they got this guy, even if he's 70, the idea that he got away with it all those years. And now they're making it more difficult to use these databases of DNA to catch criminals.
Right. It sucks. And it's like, you know what? Fair enough if people want to opt out of sharing their DNA to these databases, but to make it illegal is counterintuitive to me.
Right.
When there are so many unanswered questions out there.
Yeah. And, I've always sort of played devil's advocate on this topic. If you're going from the starting point that the people who are searching for the killers are all trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. And we know that in government and in leadership positions, we don't always have people who have the public's best interest at heart. And so if we were ever in a situation where you were accused of something and perhaps falsely, you would hope that the people who are looking at the DNA evidence don't have an ulterior motive. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Right.
So I understand why people are leery of it. I just don't know whether we should do these blanket laws saying you can't do it. I just think there should be safeguards and checks and balances as there are in government. There's also
so much misinformation as to how the DNA is used and to what people don't realize. I just this morning had a client had reached out to a possible half-sibling and who agreed to test, but he said, I heard a lot of the results on these things are just a guess. And she said, how do I respond to this? And I said, don't. Just thank him for taking it and send it on out. And on that note, we should definitely break.
Let's take a break.
All right.
If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Jeans Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
Okay, we're back.
Yes.
This week's From the Trenches
From the trenches.
This is, people ask me all the time for advice on how to reach out to matches. And I usually tell them, Just ask basic questions. Just say you're trying to figure out the connection. Could you tell me who your grandparents are? And, okay, here's an example of what I do. And I'd like your response to what you think about this.
I'll give it to you.
Yes. So this matches 102 centimorgans, which is about a third cousin, which is actually perfect. I love to reach out to people at that level because they're distant enough to not be personally affected.
They probably don't know the people that you're talking about. Yeah.
But close enough if they know their genealogy to be able to help me to point out where to look.
I see. As opposed to you're trying to find out information about my mother or my father or my brother or something. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So here's, and this is pretty standard for what I write to people. Hi, I'm trying to figure out the connection between Bob Yorgi and what did I call her? And Marjorie Smith.
Okay.
Would you be so kind as to share the tree, or if not, meaning if you don't want to share your tree, just the names of grandparents, including maiden names and approximate birth dates and locations. Thank you for any help. Julie Dixon Jackson, genetic genealogist, gave my phone number, gave my username, all of these things so that they could, try to be on. So how would you feel if you got that?
I'd probably Google you or look you up on the internet for if you had a website or just to find out who you were and whether you were legit. Because I get a lot of unsolicited emails, not through Ancestry but just in general about things. And so I usually delete them. It's always we're trying to, you want, can we design your website? You can tell when
somebody's phishing. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And I appreciate that, which is why I give as much information about myself as possible.
Right. And I think the fact that you are giving them specific names is a little more helpful than some of the things I get. Or I always get these Russian women that are trying to I need a boyfriend in America. And I'm like, what are you do? You're barking up the wrong tree on so many levels.
That was quite the impression of a Russian woman, by the way. Okay, so this was the response. Hello, Julie. Nigel is related to to Marjorie Smith through the Jones family of Hot Springs, Montana. Given that Nigel does not know Marjorie, has never heard of her prior to now, and personally found your message off-putting, he does not wish to share further information. Good luck on your research. And then her initials are BS, which I find amusing.
Wait, so you don't know who sent you that email?
It was the match's wife.
Oh, I see. All right. Are you messaging them through Ancestry? Oh, so it's not even a phishing email. It's literally
it's not like a random email. Yes, it's through the Ancestry messaging system.
See, and this is different because I've had messages through Ancestry as well, and I personally have never gotten one that I felt was inappropriate or that felt like they were trying to find out information about me for any ulterior motive. So I think that because you're using, if someone's already on Ancestry and you're on Ancestry trying to find information, that's what they're there for, right?
Right.
So you're there kind of for a common purpose to learn more about your family.
Well, some people are, some people aren't. Yeah. Some people test without even knowing about the relative matching. So we have to keep that in mind. But so I started to respond by saying, I apologize for being off-putting if that's what I was. Here's the reason why you don't know Marjorie. But as I was writing that, she came back and said, with further reflection, I just want to say that you are simply asking for too much information and kindness, in parentheses, while giving, or actually in quotes, while giving no context or reason for such an intrusive message. Why did Marjorie need you to solicit information from her cousin in such a cold fashion? I would consider a better delivery in the future. Given the fact that they are second cousins, you're kind of burning the possibility of it says possibly, but of building bridges between family members before they even have a chance to meet. Okay, so that rubbed me the wrong way. And so my response was maybe not as warm as it started out. And so I said, okay, having done this for many years, I'm surprised at that reaction, but apologize for being off-putting. The fact is, Marjorie is an adoptee and knows nothing about her biological family. The reason I ask for just facts instead of getting into it is often people will run from such an inquiry for fear of throwing someone under the proverbial bus. By doing this, I can use my skills as a genetic genealogist to figure it out for myself without having to involve someone in what may be a family secret. So I'm explaining to her
your reasons.
That I'm yes. The first rule in looking for biological family is to not lead with the adoptee narrative. I am familiar with the Bjorgi family. If I knew where Nigel fit in, it would be easier to pinpoint who I'm looking for. And then I said, by the way, they share 102 centimorgans. They are most likely third cousins, which is, that means they share 2-time great-grandparents. Okay?
Right, yeah.
And then she wrote back, I'm surprised that this reaction is surprising. Does Marjorie have any interest in knowing her genetic family, or is this simply to gain information on her direct descendants? Yes, it is simply to gain information. By the way, not descendants. She means ancestors.
Yes.
If you know who the Bjorgis are and Marjorie has no interest in who Nigel is as a person, then any family tree information that we could pass along is simply irrelevant. Ian is a cousin. No, it's not irrelevant. It's very helpful. But they seem to be irritated that we don't care who Nigel is personally. Here's the clincher. While I am empathetic as I was adopted myself, this did not strike Nigel as you hoped. Amazing. So I'm not going to keep going with the back and forth.
No, it's not worth it.
No, it's not. Well, no, I mean with you guys, I'm not going to go. The back and forth went on for quite a while.
It did. Oh, wow. Okay.
Quite a while off of Ancestry, by the way. So I responded to her about how I was surprised that she was an adoptee and was being so weird about it. And then she basically said, I'm blocking you now. Here is Nigel's email address if she would like to contact him herself. And she basically said that I was not being respectful and blah, blah, blah. It was the weirdest thing. And also accused me of making it all about myself. It was very strange. And I will say, so she not only blocked me after she gave me the email, but she also took his DNA down.
Oh, wow.
Which is weird. Long story short, just her telling me his first name and me knowing her name, I figured out within 45 minutes who the client's mother was and how she was connected to them. And yes, they do. They share second great-grandparents. Their grandparents were first cousins. So their great-grandparents were siblings. And I found a newspaper article that had his grandmother in my client's grandfather's wedding as the maid of honor. Wow. So I did actually write to him at that email address that was provided just to, and I'll admit it was just kind of to say, look, this is all I was trying to do. By the way, I know exactly what the connection is. And, I don't really understand why this was a problem, but, So, yeah, they ended up coming back at me to where I had to block them. They started Googling me and then started making these really personal emails about me being a failed actress.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, it was really weird. And they, they were literally name calling for me. It was very strange. It was very upsetting and it was astonishing. And kind of a bummer for my client because.
Sure. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. And I'm hoping that you didn't take it personally because.
Of course I did. I didn't. I didn't in the whole failed actor thing. I don't take personally. Yeah. And it just tells me exactly who they are. Long story short, even when you do everything right, it's not always gonna, it solved the case, but yeah, people suck.
Well, you know what it is that I think that some people are paranoid. Some people are very private to the point where they don't want to offer any help, at all.
Right. But it seemed to me that what really seemed to stick in their craw is that I wasn't interested in them personally.
Well, you send them your business card and say, if you're ever interested in finding out more about your genealogy, I'm your man,
Yeah. Right.
I'm sure
anyway,
I'm sure they'll call you.
I'm sure. Oh boy.
Oh
boy.
Julie, I know that sometimes you say some cases are a breeze. You go online and you find it and you're able to solve them instantly, and good for you. But you really earn your money when you have to deal with this kind of, especially where it becomes a personal attack, when it's not a personal thing at all. You're trying to do it in service of your client.
Right. And by nature of who I am, part of being an adoptee in my case and in many adoptees is that you are far more emotional and reactive, I guess.
Sure, but we've talked about this, about having to put up the boundaries when you're doing your job, and that you can still have the empathy of an adoptee without taking it personally, because you're trying to help someone else. You've already found your birth parents. Right. And so like people who are trying to go through the same journey, and you're trying to help them through, and good for you. I think what you do is amazing. And what you bring to the table is that empathy and the knowledge that you have. But don't let them get you down, because you're just doing your job and you're trying to help somebody.
And I know, and I can intellectualize that. And I know that it's nothing personal. They don't know me. It did really bother me. Wow. For no reason other than it bothered me.
Sure.
Who cares?
So I hope that by sharing it with our audience, that it has helped get it off your chest. Because I think,
thanks.
No,
Thank
really.
you.
Let's take a break.
Yes, please.
Thank you for listening to Cut Off Genes with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/Cutoff Genes podcast. Now, back to the program.
Okay, we're back. Story time.
Yay, we haven't had story time since last season.
True.
3 weeks ago.
You're correct. Okay, so this week and next week we have listener Tiffany Clark. Full disclosure, I have to apologize for the sound on this one. I didn't have my mic turned up high enough. So when I'm talking, I had to turn it up a little bit so the sound is a little uneven.
Okay. I will see what I can do in post-production to make sure that you sound good.
Thanks a lot. All right. So this is Tiffany Clark, as I said, and she's telling us this week is her story, and then next week is a story of somebody that she has been helping lately. So let's have a listen. Hey, guys. I have on the line listener and Gen Genie, Tiffany Clark. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi there.
Thank you for agreeing to tell your story. And actually, we have a couple stories from you.
I love that you refer to me as a Gen Genie, because I don't feel like I'm a Gen Genie, but it's very flattering.
Well, okay, so you're a Gen Genie in training, it sounds like.
That's probably accurate. Yeah, I'm a Gen Genie because I have a huge passion for helping people. I firmly believe that people have a right to know who they are. And this comes from my own history, which is, I think, what you want me to talk about.
Absolutely. Please.
Okay. I was born in 1967, so I'm 54 years old. And I was born in Houston, Texas. My mother moved with her husband, who I believed to be my biological father, when I was just a baby, to Arkansas, which is where I grew up. Okay. So the whole time I was growing up, for some reason, I had this sort of intuition from the first memory I had, from the time I was little, very little, that I had a different father somewhere. And I don't know if that was just an intuition. I don't know if I overheard someone talking in a time before my memories and picked up on that. I just know that it was such a strong conviction that nearly every time my parents left the house, I was searching for a clue.
Really? Okay.
Yes. It's crazy. My mom says that she always thought I was psychic. I don't know, but just I had a huge intuition. And, I hear that a lot from other NPEs, that they always had this feeling too. It's something I've heard before. But I would search. My mom had a cedar chest with her old letters, pictures, all that kind of stuff. And I was always searching through everything when they were gone, looking for, quote unquote, evidence. Yeah. And I did, my search wasn't in vain. I found a few things over the years. For one thing, I found a letter from my mother's brother that he had written her when he was in Vietnam. And in the letter, his wording was weird to me. I'm a professional writer. Okay. I've been a prolific reader all my life. So words mean a lot to me. I pick up on little innuendos. And in the letter, it said, something to the effect of, I hope you and Tiffany are happy with, insert by birth certificate, father's dad here, name here. Well, his name's Amos. Okay, no need to keep him anonymous. And so the wording was weird on that. So that I filed that away in my mind. And also, I started examining things like my birth certificate. And I think I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I first saw my birth certificate. And I was the oldest. I had a younger brother. Mm-hmm. But on my birth certificate, on a Texas birth certificate, I don't know if it's this way everywhere, but it says number of children living.
Right.
And it said 1. It said 1. So that didn't make sense to me because I'm the oldest.
So it meant number of children living in addition to this child. Okay, gotcha.
At the time of my birth.
Yes.
So, however old I was old enough to understand that this meant one of two things. I had a sibling who was born before me, mm-hmm. or my birth certificate was gotten after my brother was already born. So I confronted my mother with this. I was a little girl, and I confronted my mother with this, and she said, "Oh, it's just a typo. These state agencies make mistakes all the time." So anyhow, I let that go, but that was kind of filed away in my little mental shoebox as well. Yeah. Okay. And I did a lot of things to try to trip them up. I asked my birth certificate father one time. I just randomly approached him during the day and said, "What hospital was I born in Houston?" Mm. And he got this deer in headlights look, and he said, "I don't remember. How do you expect me to remember that?" Okay, who doesn't remember that?
Right. You visualize it immediately where you were.
Yeah. And one time I told my mom that my brother and his dad, that there's a certain look in that family that they all have, to the point where even my stepdad's sisters have grandchildren who look like him. Oh, wow. They have kind of buggy eyes, big pretty blue eyes, and blonde hair. Okay. And I'm olive complexion during the summertime when I'm tanning, and I have naturally dark brown hair and green eyes. So I didn't look like anyone in the family at all. Right. My mom is a natural blue-eyed blonde. So I asked my mom one day, I said, why don't I look like anybody? If he's my dad, why don't I look like them? And she said, "Well, you look like me," which is utterly untrue. Okay. completely false. You could put me in a room with 9 other older women, and she would be the last one you would choose as being my mom.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
But that brings me to the most difficult thing to forgive in this whole situation, which is the gaslighting. Yes. So I'll get to that later, but I was 22 years old, and I got married very young, which is very common where I grew up. But I was separated from my husband, and I was home at my mother's house in Arkansas. And it probably 2 or 3 weeks before, one of my best friends said, "You might be Amos's daughter. You kind of look like him now that I think about it." I said, okay. But I was carrying a purse, and my purse strap broke. So I went to my mom's closet to get another purse. I opened one purse, and it was a purse I didn't want to carry. It was really old fashioned looking, but it had one of those little snaps that are kind of fun to snap. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So I opened that purse, and there was a letter in there. And yeah, my mom's a really organized person. So for her to just leave things in the letter should have been in the trunk, okay, with everything else, but it wasn't. So I got the letter out of the purse, and I went and sat on her bed, and I read it. And it was from a doctor in Texas. And it was on a letterhead with his office number and his name. And it said, "I've enclosed some money for Christmas. Feel free to use it for both of the children." Oh. So I knew that I couldn't go to my mom with this letter because she was at work. But I knew that she would continue to gaslight me. Mm-hmm. Okay. I knew that the lies would continue. And so at that time, this was, the early 1990s, so there was no internet. So I, dialed information 411 and got his home number. It was early in the morning, about 8 or 9 o'clock. And I called and I said, my name is Tiffany Stropes, which was that's my birth certificate father's last name. And I need to know who you are to me. Oh. And he said, Tiffany, you really need to talk to your mother about this. And I interrupted him and I said, I cannot talk to my mother about this because she will lie to me again. She will keep lying to me. Oh, wow. And he kind of sighed and he said, I'm your father, Tiffany.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we talked for a few more minutes and I said, well, I need to go confront my mom about this. So I drove down to my mom's office and waited for her in the back, and all I did was hold up the letter. And her face sort of crumpled, and she said, do you hate me? And, I've thought about my response to that moment constantly over the years, because the answer, what I told her was, I don't hate you, I love you. Exact quote. Mm-hmm. However, that was an incomplete answer, because no, I didn't hate her, but I had so much anger because of the many years of gaslighting. My mom, this wasn't a situation where, I hear on your podcast all the time, people find out that they're an NPE and they never had any suspicion. Nobody ever lied to them. It just wasn't said. Right. This wasn't the case in my situation. Right. In my situation, I had asked dozens of times over the years. And not only did they lie, but they undermined my entire character in doing so. I was crazy. Yes. I was crazy. I was dramatic. I was a snoop. I was nosy. And not just to me, but to other people who made some sort of gesture to try to help me. At one time, I asked my cousin's wife, is he my dad? And my cousin said, you need to talk to your Aunt Jocelyn. So I told my mom about that. And she said, well, Cindy's crazy. She's always trying to stir up trouble. So it was just this huge campaign of gaslighting.
In the dark. Yeah, that's awful.
She created a whole persona for me that was Tiffany, the dramatic snooper, all to protect her little dirty secret. Yep.
Yep. I want to know more about how it happened, what the story was behind it.
Okay, the story behind it. My mother was in college in Houston, Texas, and my dad was in medical school in Houston, Texas. They met through a mutual friend and became lovers. They lived together, actually. But the problem was, I believe my dad fell in love with my mom. Mm-hmm. I have no reason to suspect that they weren't in love. However, my dad was engaged to someone else.
Okay.
His high school sweetheart. Sure. Her name is Nancy. And they were engaged. And my dad, at one point, broke up with my mom and went and married Nancy. So, and I pulled my story together through versions of both of their stories, okay, which are slightly different, but more or less the same. My dad married Nancy, and they had a small wedding reception at his fraternity house. My mom showed up there and announced that she was pregnant to the crowd.
Oh, my gosh. And she says, you're dramatic.
Yeah, but I'm dramatic. So my dad and Nancy, they got their marriage annulled.
They did?
They did. Nancy's
like that same
family, day? Shortly thereafter. Nancy's family was Catholic. And, that was the only option. But however, the complication was that my father's parents loved Nancy. Everybody loved Nancy. Mm-hmm. I love Nancy. Nancy's an incredible person.
Sure.
And my father's father, my grandfather, told him, if you don't marry Nancy, I won't finish paying for your medical school. So my father put it in Nancy's hands. He told Nancy, if you want to be married to me, think it through and let me know. And Nancy took some time to think it through, and she decided that she did. And so they got remarried. My grandfather just behaved really badly throughout the whole ordeal. They tried to pay my mom to get an abortion, my mom tells me. My grandfather tried to pay my mom to not put my father's name on the birth certificate, which my mom had already said she had no intention of doing.
Right.
But they did eventually remarry, and my dad wanted to adopt me. He and Nancy wanted to adopt me, and my mom said to him, "You will never have this baby."
Wow.
And that's where I think a lot of this came from, because my mom kept me from him. She said to protect me, but there was nothing to protect me from.
Right.
Yeah, there was nothing to protect me from. He's, for all of his, mistakes with women, he's a good man. He's a good father. He had 3 other daughters, and they had a wonderful life. So there was nothing to protect me from. My mother was hurt.
Yeah.
Okay. She felt rejected. She was dealing with, in the late 1960s, an unmarried woman with a baby. Sure. So I think there was some spite in that, and I think there was also just some pain, a lot of pain.
Yeah. Hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people hurt people.
What is your relationship like with your mom now?
It's not good because there are other factors involved. Okay. I grew up in an abusive home, an alcoholic home. Yeah. And my mother, is a smart lady, but she apparently has a very selective memory, and she seems to not remember the way things are. I have a hard time accepting the fact that she is in denial about so many things. There's also the fact that she didn't just behave badly at the time of my birth, but after I discovered this secret and got to know my father and his family, she still was behaving badly. She was still denying and lying, and I couldn't talk about it. I had to live this secret life for many, many years. But the very worst part for me after all of this came about was that all of the things she did to me with the gaslighting, she tried to do to my children. We were on vacation, a big family vacation in Galveston, and we were swimming out in the ocean. And my daughter, who was 7 or 8 at the time, started talking about her grandfather, by the name she calls him by, the nickname she calls him by. My mom's friend was there with us, and my mom said, "Francesca, what are you talking about? Who is this imaginary person you're talking about? Stop lying." And you know what? My little girl's face, and she knew she had done something wrong, but she didn't know what. Sure. And after that, we saw a lot less of my mother. It's all about her. Everything is all about her, and she's always been that way. But I didn't realize just how much until there's a before and after in my life. Right. Okay, I didn't realize how much until after.
Right.
If I have, in recent years joined Facebook groups for NPEs, and I realized how common my experience was.
Yeah.
All of this. And I thought for decades, I thought I was the only one. I thought this was a unique experience, and I thought all the rejection, all the lies, all the gaslighting, all of the, just everything about the NPE experience, I realized it was just me. And I really wish, I think my life would have been so much better if I had been a part of the NPE community when I was young. Yeah. And that's why I'm not a big support group person. I think the worst, most boring thing in the world is a bunch of people sitting together complaining.
Yeah.
But if you've been through this, I highly recommend seeking out one of these groups so that you understand that everything that you experience is very common.
Right. When this happened to you, that was before DNA testing or consumer DNA testing, and so there was no NPE community. We didn't realize how widespread it was until this little gift came along that blew up everybody's world and their secrets.
Incidentally, DNA confirmed my paternity.
Oh, it did?
Incidentally.
Okay.
After, yes.
Right. But,
you know what, though? If I had not found that letter, my mom would be breaking her neck trying to keep me from taking a DNA test.
Wow. Yeah, you're like a pioneer in PE. Thank you for telling that story.
You're welcome.
And that provides a nice background for the next one. All right. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Next week is a case that is not completely resolved, but we're very close to it. I say where because she had me look at it, and I believe she is correct in her assumption. But we will hear that next episode.
In the meantime, I'm Richard Castle, and if you are interested, you can go to my website and learn about my piano playing, my musical theater writing, my everything at richardcastle.com, or you could follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Castle Songs. What about you, Julie? How do they reach out to you?
Here's how they reach out to me. You can follow me on Twitter at joolsjackson with 2 O's. Follow the podcast on Twitter at CutOff Jeans Pod. Join the CutOff Jeans group on Facebook. Answer a question. Come on in. And you can send me a personal message at joolsjackson@cutoffjeans.com. Also, if you listen, well, of course you listen because you're listening now, please feel free to subscribe, rate, and review to the podcast. We could use some new reviews to get our visibility up there a little.
And also thanks to our patrons, our current patrons, and to our future patrons who want to go to Patreon. And, well, you heard about how to do that on the break. I have a little commercial, but I just want to say thank you. A shout out to our patrons.
Thank you, patrons. And in the meantime, before we see you again, don't forget, the truth is in your jeans.